let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, fetism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show for the first time. Today we've got our friend Brandon.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm honored.
Brandon baby, how are you today?
I'm doing all right. I am glad that we have a holiday coming up on Monday of next week. I'm happy about that. I can deal without the cold, but at least it is not icy out.
Yes, it is. Things I'm learning about the Northern Hemisphere, because like in Australia, I am very used to like the height of summer being Christmas time, kind of like the middle point. So even though it's still hot, throughout January, February, it does begin to taper off at the new year. Whereas like in London, I saw snow for the first time like just the other day. Like she waits until after the new year to introduce the true cold and the frost. And Tim, based on what you've said, Cleveland is miserable
all year round. There's no such thing as a good time to be in Cleveland.
I remember.
It's miserable every month of the year.
I remember back in the day, so my aunt used to live in Cleveland. Like she would call probably as early as like November or December to say that they were going to get a 3-4 foot snowstorm. So
yeah, we haven't, the last couple of years, it's actually been pretty mild. We only had 2 major snowfalls last year. We've had 1 major snowfall so far, but it's usually February when we get slammed, like February, early March, and then there's always one last hurrah at like the end of April for some reason. Like end of April, beginning of May, some ice storm will come through and knock a bunch of trees over, and then all of a sudden it's 80 degrees.
That's global warming for you.
I know.
The delights, the love. But listen, I'm so excited that we get to have the opportunity to talk to you today because, dear listeners, and you will see this in the show notes, for anyone who does not know, Brandon here is the mind, the genius, the creative energy behind the Gay Body Guide. You should be hearing, like, that scene in Gladiator where he stands with his arms up and the crowd is just like, this is what should be happening. Because having read through a version of the Gay Body Guide before, it's fucking fantastic, mate. Like, I hope you know this. It's great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I do try. I try to put some good out there. I try to just celebrate who and what we are and set the course for an equal playing field.
So, look, to kick things off question-wise, for anyone who happens to not know, what is the Gay Body Guide?
That is a good question. So the Gay Body Guide is a campaign and it's also a book. The book breaks down all of our tribes and kinks that have formed amongst LGBTQ plus people. So you're talking bears and twinks and pups and gainers, of course. As much as I've been able to research and find out about, each chapter talks about what those different tribes are, what they are about, and the different classifications or labels that fall underneath each of those umbrellas. The campaign emerged pretty much around the same time as a means to celebrate body positivity amongst the LGBTQ plus community, but also reframe what it means to be attractive, sexy, viable, all of those things. And it was very important for me to level the playing field, as I mentioned, because what happens in our community quite often is there's a lot of judgment and classism that happens. Oh, you're too this, you're too that, you don't belong here, you shouldn't be here, you're ugly, all of that stuff. And I wanted to give space to people who are not the straight, well, not straight, but the quote straight acting tall, blonde, white men, fit, muscular, masculine. We come in all different shapes and colors, and there's a reason why our flag looks the way it does, because it's not just a solid color flag, because we're not just one note.
I mean, honestly, leave it all there out on the table, because is that, or is that not the whole message of this podcast, right? To explore everything about who and what we are, and to talk about the diversity within who and what we are. We are not one monolithic look or style or shape of body. We are all things, all shapes, all sizes, all colors and creeds, all come together. And so this ultimately is the message that I think we really do share. And I think that's just wonderful, wonderful to hear more about. And, we talked very briefly before the podcast that, it feels like in the 20s, the modern 20s, that this is a conversation we've got to come back to. It felt like in the 10s, we were making some progress. Feels like COVID maybe put a stopper just because of world, pandemic shit. We had a lot to think about. That, to be fair, there was a lot on the go, like not dying. So in fairness, I think a few people might have ignored certain things. But we're really coming back to it, and I love that the Gay Body Guide has been here through all of that and that mission. And I want to ask for yourself, because you are a gorgeously melanated man. You are a strong-looking, gorgeous hunk of man. I want to ask for you, like, what has your personal journey been like in terms of that, understanding of self, understanding of labels, that journey that you've been on through the gay and queer community? What has that been like for you?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for the compliment. So I can tell you two things about that. Let me start with me first, and then I can talk to you about how the guide came about. As far as when I look back at my own history, I think part of it is definitely just age. There comes a point, and it's true, that it does get better. So regardless of what you're going through in your personal life or within the community, it does get better. But then you become more centered as you get older. Now, I've also come to realize that I am my own worst critic, and I think we all are. And there has to come a point with all of us where we forgive ourselves for not being that mold of a person that is shoved down our throats. So there's that. I had to really do some self-work, and quite frankly, this project has helped even me reframe my own, not my own beauty standards, but how I view myself. So let me rewind back to 2015 and tell you a little bit about how this project came about, and I'll kind of revisit this topic. As I've gotten older and society has changed, I've become more comfortable coming out at work. And 2015, I had a job that had mostly younger people in it. So naturally, they just didn't care what walk of life you were. It was a tight-knit group, and I felt comfortable coming out. And I was out at happy hour with my coworkers, and they were talking about dating and their struggles and whatnot, and they asked me what my experience was. And I told them a little bit about the challenges that we have, especially that I have as a man of color who, regardless of how people may find me attractive or not, there are multiple stages of challenges that I've had to navigate, which is the racial aspect. I am not super masculine. I'm kind of like, I consider myself to be in between. So then there's that hurdle. I'm not a muscular individual. So then there's that hurdle. And I told my coworkers about kind of the pecking order that's formed in our society, that muscular white men are at the top of the food chain. And there's this then classism that falls beneath that. But then people can find their own little avenues, whether you're a bear and you go to bear bars, or you're a twink and you find your people, or you're a pup. And when I was explaining all of this stuff, they found it quite humorous but fascinating at the same time. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe I can use my skill set, being a graphic designer and a web designer by trade, to really help the straight community understand who we are and how multifaceted we are. Around that same time, I started to see twinks calling themselves bears because they had grown out a beard. And I realized that they were probably doing it for acceptance because there's a lot of shaming that goes on, as we all know, and it happens at both ends of the spectrum. You're either too fat or you're too skinny. Like nobody's ever satisfied. And I was really baffled, but also a little offended that our society had gotten to a point where we couldn't just sit in who we are and then just go out in the world and say, here I am, take it or leave it. Now we're in some ways mislabeling ourselves just so we could fit in, just so we're accepted, just so we're seen as more masculine, strong, whatever. So I said, okay, I think I have some obligation to educate the straight community about who we are, but preserve the definitions of our labels so that people will know what they are, but not misrepresent who they are and misrepresent each other. So I started writing and I sat on it for a couple of years because even at the time, there was a it was very taboo to label yourself and to label other people. And I want to touch on that label bit a little bit later, but a lot of people feel like labels are confining or you're putting me in a box. Whereas through the guide, I'm trying to say it's okay to identify with a group of people or a body type or a kink. There's nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't have to feel shame over who we identify with, what we're into, or what we're born with. So let me celebrate all of what this community is and positively define what it is based on research and talking to some friends and whatnot, and put it in a format that does not shame one body type or one label over another. So eventually, like I said, I sat on it for a couple of years and then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to put this out there because I really want to just see what happens. And once I put it out there, I started to realize that it was beyond what I thought it was. It became a tool for queer men and queer people to find their place, to work on their self-esteem and their self-image, to have conversations with their friends and loved ones about something they were feeling, something they were attracted to, something they were interested in. And it was eye-opening for me because I've had many people reach out over the world. Not to say the guide has flown off the shelves, but as I started to build a following, a lot of people started to open up and share their experiences. And some of those experiences came from muscular men who are at the top of the food chain. And I learned that they're just as insecure, if not more, than the rest of us. So that was a huge finding for me. I was like, okay, this is now about self empowerment, giving people permission to belong, redefining what queer or gay is. There is no right way to be queer. There is no right way to be trans or queer or bisexual. And also establishing the guide as a tool to help people find self-worth within themselves, not on social media, not on Grindr, not in the news, not in Men's Health. Our self-worth has to start within us. And labels aren't a bad thing, as I mentioned. I know that was a lot.
No, it's okay. It's because when you said like the there was that time period where everyone was like, "Oh, don't put a label on me. I don't want any labels." And so I was confused when all of these labels just suddenly started popping up, and I'm like, "But wait a minute. I thought we didn't want labels." And then they're like, no, no, labels galore. And I'm like, I always like didn't quite understand the no label um argument. Because I'm like, but that's how we orient ourselves to the world, is like by knowing what something is. Like if you don't know
Yes.
what anything is, how do you navigate through life?
Yes, I agree with that 100%. And I think in doing this project, I also have come to realize that even the queer community doesn't know all of the labels that are out there. And since I started this project or really released it, which was in about 2018, I've gone through several versions of this and expanded on it and added to it and refined it because our community is constantly evolving and changing. And most people know the common ones like twink, bear. They don't know what a fox is. They don't know. Maybe they've heard of otter, maybe not.
I didn't
They
know we had
don't.
another animal added to the barnyard.
Oh,
There's a fox now. Because
oh,
when
there's.
the ones that I've always been aware of were twink, bear, wolf, otter, cub, and then someone one time told me, oh, dolphin. I'm like, what the fuck is a dolphin? They're like, well, it's a smooth, hairless person. I'm like, for Christ's sake, leave it up to
And
gay men to compare everybody to animals and then come up with ridiculous ones.
Mm.
yeah, I mean, there's a whole jungle out there. But again, it's that jungle that we can find our place in. And we can all coexist in the jungle too. Like, the gorillas don't have to be over here on the west side of the forest, separated and isolated from the giraffes on the other side. We can all coexist in this community.
Yes.
I also got tired of the shaming as well, too. I mean, I was just like, as I've gotten older, and I'm a Pisces to a T, so I root for the underdog. I'm sensitive and emotional. I just don't think the shaming is necessary.
Mm. I mean, listen, first of all, Zootopia said it best. Like, we all out here hanging out together in a big old city, having a good old time. Also, I love that you're a Pisces. This is just like a water,
Yeah,
water sign.
it's the three water signs. Yeah,
Oh, you guys are water signs as
I'm a
well?
Cancer, and
And I'm a Scorpio. But I love that desire for inclusivity that doesn't say, okay, it's a conversation point I feel like I've come to a little bit recently. I heard this on a podcast called Semi Qualified Queens, all right, which is done about Canada's drag race. And two of the queens were answering a question on, why Canada's drag scene is so wonderfully diverse and why their seasons have such great Indigenous representation and Asian representation. And, one of the queens, Cynthia, actually made a point of saying, a lot of people will describe modern cultures like a melting pot. We all come together, but actually, a melting pot isn't actually a great way to describe what culture should be. Because with a melting pot, you take all these wonderfully unique and individual pieces, and then you put them all together, and then they just kind of boil down into the same soup. And usually,
Yeah.
because you've added so much bright color, that soup turns to be a little bit of a gray brown sludge. It's not always the best approach to things. Whereas if we reframe it as a mosaic, it becomes a much different conversation because in a mosaic, you don't even need pieces to be the same size or shape or color or nothing. You just have this wonderful mishmash of different bits and pieces, but everything fits together perfectly. And then they all get welded together. And then you're left with this wonderful stained glass piece or this wonderful tile piece. But it's this beautiful thing where every little piece is represented. And when you go and look for it, you can see it and you can see where it fits. And you know that if you were to remove that teeny tiny piece, the whole image would be thrown off. All the pieces are required to make the thing make sense. So that's the real vibe of it. I think that there's this mosaic of all of us coming together to make it what it is. And I mean, Tim, for yourself, we're constantly coming back to this. You've been through the leather scene, you know the old guard. Like, what do you feel is the biggest difference these days between maybe how you learn about the LGBT when you first came out versus today?
well, back when I was 18 and going out into the scene for the first time, it's not like anybody was having conversations about how to be a homosexual and like, what is the correct way to be a homosexual. It was mostly just fend for yourself, kid. You just kind of got tossed to the wolves, and you either learned how to run with the pack, or you ended up being the lone wolf that would, stand around the edges of the bar and not talk to anybody. Today, because I don't really frequent a lot of gay establishments like I used to, I don't know what the current temperature is for queer youth. But I feel overall, because they've had social media their whole lives, because they've had this level of connectivity that we didn't have when we were young, that possibly things are a little bit easier. I mean, relationships don't change. It's going to be, if you're going to have problems in relationships, no matter where you are, who you are, what. But I'm hoping that it's gotten a little bit easier for them to navigate in their own community because, like I said, I got no help. And the few times that people did sort of like take me aside and try to impart some wisdom on me, it was peppered throughout all of my 20s, you know. So it wasn't like I had a consistent mentor or anything. I just had people who would occasionally try to, impart something on me. But so like yeah, like I was saying, I hope that it's a little bit easier for queer youth today. And something like the Gay Body Guide is a great intro. It's a great 101. I mean, it's something that can define things in very easy to understand terms. And I wish that, because like when I would go to the gay and lesbian section of like a Barnes and Noble or a Walden, the only thing that was there was softcore porn.
Yeah, or these thick academic books that, are hard to read or digest. And I have not seen any resources out there that break down the community this way, especially without throwing some snark or judgment at one of the labels. I mean, when I did this, I was like, okay, let me make sure there aren't any other books out there like that. Didn't see anything. I saw a bunch of blogs that talked about the labels and the tribes and whatnot, but they would always slight one of the groups in one way or another. I was like, I don't want to do that. That's dumb. Like, I love what you said, James, about the mosaic because that is exactly why I designed the cover, the latest version of it anyway. I mean, I know you guys, the listeners can't see it, but just to show you, this is what it is right now. And I originally had a muscular white male's torso on the cover because at the time I thought this is not going to be adopted if anything else is on there. And over time, once I realized exactly what we're talking about, that there's something bigger out there that we're not quite tapping into, I was like, how do I reinterpret what it means to be queer and design it in a way that shows pieces coming together, different size, different shape pieces coming together? That is what we need, and that is what we should have at the forefront of our minds in everything that we do. We look at, and I will say, Tim, just to touch on what you said, I do agree that it might be easier for younger people nowadays because you can more passively interact with people. You don't
Yeah.
have to walk up to someone in a bar and introduce
Yeah.
yourself. You can just
I
send
mean,
a
kids,
message
we used to
to,
have to introduce ourselves to strangers and try to make small talk. Like
right,
we had to literally go to a bar, walk up to somebody, ask them, "Hey, can I buy you a drink?" or try to get a drink off of them. And
exactly. It's that. It is there's less of a stigma around sexually transmitted infection.
yeah,
So there's less
that's
of
come
that
a
fear
long, long
there.
way.
Huge. There's more acceptance in a way, but I think social media is degrading some of that stuff because now people think that what they see on social media is the standard, the norm,
Oh yeah.
not judging, but a
I mean,
lot of,
but like, how else would that go? Like, what is the trajectory of that? Of course, the more time you spend looking at a screen, the more you're going to sort of perceive that as your reality. Like
yeah,
I said, when we were growing up, our mothers would kick us out of the house. Don't come back until the sun comes down because they wanted to clean or they wanted to be alone, whatever. But like, we were told to go outside the house and don't come back till dinner time. And we didn't have like we had television, we had video games, but usually our parents were also harping on us about that. Like, don't spend all day watching TV. You've been playing video games for 3 hours. Get the hell out of the house, you know. And
yeah.
so, I mean, their reality is of course going to reflect, or their perception rather, I should say, is going to reflect everything that they've been staring at their whole lives.
Yep.
What's that phrase that people say, like, mind your thoughts become your words become your actions become your choices become your destiny. You know, what we invest in becomes the life that we look to. And to bring it around to gaining specifically for a moment, this is obviously like the biggest piece of advice when it comes to gaining. Like, if you really want to be a big boy and you spent your whole life thin, baby, you have got to start making steps and changes to live like a fat boy. You have to change your diet, your exercise regime, your lifestyle habits, all of it. You've got to do that. You can't expect to do the same thing and expect a different result, right? But something I want to zoom in on here real quick, Brandon, is you had mentioned when you had started to get responses from people, it was even the muscular boys who was reaching out to you to say, I am feeling a stress. I am feeling an anxiety and a disconnect with my identity. And it's like, even the people at the top of the heap feel that struggle. It's the same thing with body culture. It's the same thing with race and gender and all of it. Because when you are in the privilege, when you are in the majority, of course, you do not see what all the other people are experiencing. But that same struggle affects you too. Because all you have to rely on is the unit of people around you to substantiate what's going on. But we are all of us, even those of us who exist in the majority in different ways, made up of different facets. And all of those facets are now getting called into question. So you don't have the opportunity these days to just be the straight acting, muscular, white, gay man and think that it's going to coast you through, because all these different aspects of your life are going to get picked at, and you are going to be forced and obliged to content with what is going on in your identity and in your life. And you're going to have to ask yourself the question that everybody else, because minority things has been happening, had to ask themselves already. They've already done a lot of that work. People have already been figuring themselves out. Whereas all these people now here sitting at the top of the heap are watching it crumble underneath them and realizing at some stage not too far away, I have got to start to deal with some unanswered questions. And I've got to start to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. I cannot lean on this anymore. And I will say that is a change and a shift I am seeing in a lot of different circles. People are really starting to accept the fact that you can't just bury your head in the sand anymore. You really have to sit up and go, okay, let's talk about this. I need to start to deal with this. I need to start to maybe unlearn some things, and I need to now start getting into some different things. So I think things like what you've created are so important for that exact reason, because when someone sat there going, well, hey, I need to unpick all this. Where do I go? Who do I talk to? What do I do? Pick up a book. And how about you pick up the Gay Body Guide? How about you look into a resource that has been well researched and put together, designed in such a way as to give you this information from the grassroots up? Because sometimes I feel like as well, there's this presumption like, oh, you look a certain type of way, so you must know about X, Y, Z. You look like the kind of person who, baby, you don't know that. You don't know me. That's like a very American thing, right? Like, you don't know me. Like, you don't know all that. So like, it's a wonderful thing to have to get a more holistic view of those types of things as well. And I want to ask you here, like, since creating the guide, and like you say, it's gone through some edits, some iterations, you've had the opportunity to have some wonderful engagements with people. What kind of changes have you noticed in your life as you've begun to reckon with those different bits and pieces for yourself?
We're getting deep now. Well, for one thing, doing this project has helped validate and reinforce with me that it's a cliche, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder, number one. And beautiful, attractive, sexy, even masculine can come in different shapes and forms. It does not have to be one way. And through that, I've been able to say, okay, yes, I'm a slim guy. Yes, I'm not tall. Yes, I'm not masculine. But that's okay, because if I look in the mirror and pick apart myself, that's on me. If someone else doesn't like the way I look or sound or carry myself, that's on them. And that there's a great quote, which is, "What you think of me is none of my business." And I think as men and trans people and non-binary, we often look for other people to validate us. I think that's natural, and I think that's okay, but it needs to be balanced. So I would say that's one thing that I've learned, to be be okay with myself. I don't have to look like Zac Efron. The other thing is, I think I mentioned this earlier, that I had to come to a place to forgive myself for not fitting in the standard, the beauty, the gay body norms. Not to say that I did anything wrong. I can't help how I was born. I can't help my skin tone. I can't help my height. But I had to literally say to myself, I forgive you for not being the perfect gay body norm. And there's a lot of conversations, especially over the past few years, about forgiveness, but sometimes we have to forgive ourselves and just focus on what we can offer someone else or the world. Focus on the qualities that we do have. Because if we keep picking ourselves apart, we're going to become our own bully. And self-bullying is a real thing. I will say what I've learned about other people is that we're all just looking for acceptance and love. And that came back to me, which is like, well, why can't I provide that acceptance? Why can't I use my skill set, but also just who I am in the gay community specifically, to just help empower someone else? Let's think about karma. Let's think about passing things forward. Why not? Why would I want to tear someone down? Why would I want to be divisive? Doesn't make any sense to me. That's also possibly me getting older as well. Like, I'm going to be 42 in a couple of months. I don't have time to shred someone up, because, not that I did before, but to shred someone up for how they look or how they act. Come on. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, and vice versa.
I'm sorry, you just said you're gonna be 42 in a couple months, and I'm just like, the audacity to look the way you do, because I thought you was my age. I thought you was like early 30s, 31. Bitch. God damn.
Thank you. I'm old. I'm old and tired.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Oh,
But like,
shoot.
there's a lot of people out there who understandably can't leave where they reside for whatever reasons, whether it's financial or not having resources. So it's easy for me to say, okay, you got to find your people, but we all don't have to stay in the jail of body norms. We don't. It might be hard sometimes, but we have the right to take up space on this planet and in the community, period. And if somebody doesn't like it, they can go scratch. They can go fuck themselves.
Can I just say on a personal note, I love that in the gay body guide, you've included a page for gainers. And the reason why this is so important to me is because like I would have loved to have had a definition for what I was into, because I didn't have one for the longest time. I mean, I had to go online and discover all these terms myself. If I had known that earlier, I'd be like, oh, okay, well, finally, I know what this is. Like,
Yeah. It's interesting because I tried to keep each chapter to a page. So there's so much more that can be talked about a lot of the different tribes and labels. But I was intentional about including gainers in the guide because it is a faction of the LGBTQ plus community. There's no denying it. And with all the body shaming that happens within the community, I was like, why would I leave that out? Those who are gainers are still part of the community. And I've also seen a lot, not a lot. Luckily, I have not gotten a lot of guff for including larger bodies and gainers in the guide. I have had a few people reach out to say, why is this in here? Why are you promoting this? This is unhealthy. This is disgusting. Again,
Can I just say real quickly,
please.
I fucking hate that answer. Okay, like, well, why do you want to promote unhealthy things? All kinds of unhealthy things are promoted. Every time you've ever seen a commercial for fast food, anytime you've ever seen an advertisement for smoking, basically any product that is put out there all has warning labels, may cause cancer, may do this, yada yada yada. If I want to promote obesity, so the fuck what? So the fuck what? If that's what I want to promote, god damn it, I live in the United States. I can promote it if I want to.
Yeah.
There's millions of people out here promoting all kinds of horrible shit. James loves to bring up an example of so James and I were watching a little documentary series with Chelsea Handler, where she one of the episodes she went to the
Oh
South and she
yeah.
was trying to address the racism stereotypes in the South and all that. And she came across a man who runs his own podcast, who is a neo-Nazi, who very proudly, spews this crap across the airway to anyone who wants to listen. I'm like, now if that man is allowed to do whatever he wants unencumbered, then who the fuck cares if I'm promoting obesity? There's so many worse things out there to promote than being fat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the thing. When I have gotten these trolls, my response to them is, I am not here to judge. What someone does with their body is between them, and if it even goes that far, between them and their healthcare practitioner, their healthcare taker. That whatever people decide to do with their bodies does not take away the fact that they are part of the broader LGBTQ plus community, period.
Mm.
You may not like it, but if you don't like it, then don't look or don't engage or
Say it
it's
again. Say it again. Listen. This is the big thing I think we should be promoting. And I'm seeing more people talk about this like in the 20s now, but it's like if you don't like it, change the channel. If you
yep.
don't like it, don't what's the joke? If you don't like gay marriage, don't have one. Like, bitch, look away. Turn the corner. Go like the sheer audacity of someone who was like, this concept that has nothing to do with me. I don't like it. It must not exist. How dare it exist in the periphery of my human experience? Like, the sheer audacity of that
I know,
is,
it's like we're so terribly sorry to inconvenience you to, like just
Right.
by existing, but can you just put up with it?
That is exactly what drives men to the opposite end, which is anorexia, or bulimia, which is not healthy if you really want to go there. Like,
yeah.
you can't just, there's a lot of binary thinking that happens too, which is that, oh, fat equals unhealthy. And you don't know what someone's medical record is, number one. Number two, there are different forms and aspects of gaining. So some people just want to gain muscle. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Some
Ain't,
people,
ain't nobody out here complaining about the muscle bitches. Ain't nobody
well,
say
yeah,
nothing about that.
right.
Well, don't get me wrong. The moment you say like there's nobody, it's like somebody in the comments is gonna be like, I do that, and it's like, whatever, contrarian, like just trying to prove a point.
And that can be considered unhealthy too. If you're going to the gym hours and hours a day, starving yourself, taking steroids or any other performance enhancing drugs just to have that build and that look, I would think that some people would argue that that's probably not healthy either. So it's like, stay out of people's refrigerators, stay out of people's bedrooms. Let's just focus on, we have a community here, we all belong in it, and that's it, in my opinion.
I mean, honestly, what I love about this conversation is there are so many directions it can go, but just thinking about bodies and really the comparison I want to make here is like back in the early 2010s, the comment that we were making as queer people was, we're gay and it's okay. We love like you do. Love is love. We're just like you. because we had to appeal to the most like sterile common denominator of heterosexuality in order to like get same-sex marriage. But the reality is, I'm a faggot and I could be vastly different to you, but I still deserve the right to exist and live life on my terms. And if you don't understand it, you've got two options, baby. You either make the effort to learn by asking the right people to find out, or you got to decide in that moment, this isn't for me. But again, I think this is why what you do is so important because it brings up all of these conversations. And I think it reminds us as gainers, yes, this podcast is about gaining, it's about size, it's about fatness. But the reality is, all of those tropes, even in regards to body, are still so tightly linked to aspects of gender, race, disability, queerness, all this access and experience. We are not some kind of monolithic idea afloat in the ocean. We are actually very much in the conversation about bodies and the lived experience that is happening to everyone right at this moment.
Yeah, I agree. And I will also throw in to add to what you said, which is that people need to understand the history of our community. Bears kind of came out of the 70s and 80s because they needed a place to go around other men who had their similar body type. And then gaining kind of came out of that. And part of all of that came out of the AIDS epidemic. If you were gangly and skinny, you were considered sick, whether you had HIV or AIDS or not. And part of gaining, for as I understand it, is that people were gaining weight on purpose so they weren't perceived as being sick or weak. So it's like we need to understand our historical traumas as well and be a little bit more compassionate about where our individual subcommittees and subcultures have come from, and maybe then we can take the sting out of the judgment. Maybe, yeah. But also, I think we just need to see each other as people. Okay, you're a gainer. That's not something I choose to do. Fine. I can still be your friend. I can still hang out with you. We can still talk about it. It's not like you're out there killing kittens and drowning babies. Like
or shooting up heroin or robbing liquor stores, or like you're not a deviant just because you have a certain proclivity.
Right. It all goes back to like the policing, right? There's a lot of policing that goes on in our community. There's racial policing, there's body policing, there's kink. It's what happened to the days when we didn't have a place to go? We had to go to Stonewall and other places where we had to sneak and hide our identities. And then once we did have that safe haven, we could just be free. What happened to that? We've put ourselves right back in jail because I don't like the fact that you chug a tub of melted ice cream, so I'm going to troll you. Relax. It's not your business. It's not that serious. Like, let people manage their bodies and their subcultures and their tribes how they want to.
Something that I notice more often as time goes on with, I mean, like, I swear this does have something to do with the community, but then it also has something to do with things worldwide. It's like, I was talking to you about this, James, about how there's like the two opposite ends of the spectrum with things. It's like for every George Santos, we have a Pete Buttigieg, and it's like, so on the opposite side of all this, like body shaming and misinformation and putting ourselves in boxes and prisons, we've got things like the Gay Body Guide on the other side of it. And it's like that's the only way that we're going to, like Brandon was saying, learn about ourselves is if more things like the Gay Body Guide get published. Because we had mentioned previously about how, like, if you went to the gay section in a bookstore, it was either like trashy romance novels, softcore porn, or academic studies. There was really nothing that was easy to understand and like gave you a good concept of what the community is and all of its different facets. So like we need more things like the Gay Body Guide, because that's how people are going to learn where they come from.
Thank you for saying that. I think that's exactly why I did it, and also just to preserve a piece of our history, but preserve how we've identified ourselves. Preserve like the definitions of why the society is the way it is, the community is the way it is. I think it's important to do that so that way, obviously language evolves and changes and whatnot, but what I saw back in 2015 with twinks growing beards and saying, I'm a bear, it's like, oh, honey, like, I don't want to police how people want to identify themselves, but it's like there is something already out there. There is an establishment out there. You can be a twink with a beard and still be a twink and be okay and be accepted.
You can be covered in body hair and thin and not consider yourself an otter or a cub. It's I mean, it's like you said, you don't want to police how other people identify, but it's like it is funny when someone thinks that they have like keyed themselves into a particular facet of the community and really they haven't.
Well,
Yeah,
I was just gonna say, like, I think what's really interesting because we've really noticed this, like, Scissor's cuffing season song that she did on SNL is a great litmus test for this because when I tell you the number of fucking twink ass bitches fucking strutting around with their no abs for 2 seconds, belly bloat because they ate a fucking slice of bread toast, bitch ass being like, it's cuffing season, I need a baby. Like, baby, this is not for you. You need to stop this. And the reason why people do that is because, genuinely speaking, regarding bodies, people don't understand. We have such fat phobia in our society that thin people look at themselves bloated after a slice of toast and go, fuck, I'm obese. I'm like ready to drop down dead from diabetes because I ate an ice cream sundae. I better go run for 16 hours or I'll kill myself because I have deigned to have like the smallest percentile of body fat on my body. And it's like, it makes sense, and that's why those guys think that way. Like, oh, I've got a beard now, that makes me a bear because I guess I'm obese at 140 pounds. I guess I am just just skidding towards the grave. Like, it is an importance about, much like with the gay body guide, becoming more familiar with the entire spectrum of the human experience. Because you were talking about this before, Tim, and Brendan, you were saying this about orientation. Like, sexual orientation is what we used to call it. How you orient yourself, how you position yourself. But you don't just position yourself in relation to you and the other thing, you also understand in relation to everything else around you. It is not just 2 points on a map, it is all the things in between and everything else around. So it is so important that we understand not just that there's thinness and that there's fatness, but also that there is, like we were saying, elements of race to be considered, elements of disability access, elements of gender that we just need to get into and understand that we are all here occupying some space. Because once we realize that there's a little bit more going on, like maybe we'll look around and be like, oh, you know what? I knew I wasn't a twink. I thought I was a bear, but actually, maybe it's more like this. And that's going to help someone to really have a better understanding of themselves. Like triangulation, you've got to have at least 3 points of data to figure out the middle point. You know what I'm saying?
very well said.
I want to ask here real quick, like in terms of production, and I know this might not be like such a salacious or fun question, but I'm curious as a content creator, in terms of production, talk to us about like what kind of hurdles have you encountered when it comes to, I mean, yes, it's available online, it's a downloadable thing, but it is also a delightfully glossy hardcovered thing that you can purchase and have as a physical thing that you can hold. It's wonderful. But like what are the challenges that you have encountered in terms of the behind the scenes, the production? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, everything. So, printing is expensive. Luckily, so the printer I was using before was just astronomical. And as the book has grown in page count, obviously printing is expensive. Shipping is expensive. I mean, the post office has just gotten more and more expensive, and there are fewer and fewer options to actually ship your work out, especially if you're really a one-man show like I am with this. Now, luckily, the guide is available on Amazon, which has cut costs down considerably, so I was able to lower the price a little bit. I did have the advantage of being, I don't consider myself an author, but I do like to write. So I was able to take care of that. I was able to take care of the design. Marketing is a challenge. So when you're essentially a sole prop, it's really difficult to navigate social media and find resources to advertise your product because you're competing with so many other accounts and algorithms and you name it. So it's difficult to build a social media following and sustain it as well, especially with the game of social media that occurs, which is that people will follow you and then they'll unfollow you. They just want to get the likes and the followers. They don't really care about your content. I'd also say it's been a challenge because body inclusivity and body acceptance is not as popular as a muscular guy taking off his shirt and posting pictures on Instagram or Twitter slash X and Facebook. So I would say that the cards are stacked against me in that regard. And as we talked about earlier, people are a little bit adverse to labels and maybe they don't see the value in the book, but those who have gotten it and those that have followed the account get it. So I think there's something to be said that there's just a certain smaller niche market for something like this where people want to find a resource that can help them build self-esteem or recalibrate who they are or help them find their tribe of people. It's been interesting, I'll say. It's almost like, in a way, maybe our community isn't totally, tying back to what you said, Tim, earlier, maybe our community isn't used to just going to find a book for resources. We go to Google, we go to other digital channels. Speaking of digital, people have also said, hey, why don't you do an ebook? Well, I tried that. The platforms to do an ebook are expensive. I can explore Amazon, but I got to find 5 hours to redesign the book in the format that they needed in. But I didn't get a ton of sales as an ebook either, so I ended up dropping it. So there's a lot that's happened, especially with the pandemic. Resources and materials got more expensive, so it's a challenge. But I didn't let that stop me. I said I'm going to keep doing this because this thing is bigger than me. It really is.
If there is one thing that I think most queer people can relate to, it is the idea of tenacity. Because so many things in life, no matter what margins and intersections you find yourself at, will challenge you and put you in a position where it says, well, you know your shit. You know you're scum of the earth. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to do anything. Like, this isn't for you. And queer tenacity is saying, fucking watch me, cunt, and going out and doing it anyways. And I think this speaks to everything about the way that you do what you do and who you are as a person. From so many years ago now, having this initial kernel of an idea that you spent time, developed into something, you've revisited it, you have addressed these needs as a solo machine. Do you ever get this where people are like, oh, you must be a part of a great big company that makes this happen, because how could little old you produce physical copies of all of this? Because we still get people who are like, you're getting like advert money from the podcast, right? And it's like, no. I dedicate my time and my ass to get this shit off the ground. I don't get paid for it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Thank you for saying that. I can't say people have come right out and said that they think that this is like a multi-person operation. I tend not to show my face too much on the guide because it's not really about me, but I can see how some people could think or have thought that maybe there's like maybe two people running it. Now, I do get people wanting a copy of the guide for free, and I've had to turn that down to say, hey, look, I've spent my own personal money on this, and no, I can't give it to you for free. Unless it's going to a good cause. Like, they're like, all right, we want to raffle this off to give to charity. Then I'll be like, okay. But I do think sometimes people forget that it costs money to make a product like this, and it's hours and hours and hours of time to try to promote it and put it on social media and create all the graphics and the story templates that are on the Instagram account and outreach.
There is something I want to say here, and I know this is not an original thought, but I feel like this is one of those things that's always good to repeat. Y'all faggots will drop hundreds of dollars on a Beyonce ticket for back row around the corner behind the fucking pylon just to get a chance that you might breathe the same oxygen as that bitch. But your friend works blood, sweat, and tears to make some shit, and you go, no, like, I don't have the money this month. I can't. I'm sorry, it's not in the budget. I want to support you, but this isn't quite. Can we fucking stop with this bullshit? Like, we need more money in the hands of the people to do the thing. We need more boots on the ground. We need more, like, bitch, this is how we got fucking Pride, period. Is bitches got together and put shit on a sign and then fucking marched to the extent that it caught on around the globe. Like, we need to show up for these things. And this is in no way to infer that the Gay Body Guide could be going anywhere anytime soon, but it's still very much that thing of, y'all, we have something wonderful right in front of us. We don't need to caterwaul about, like, oh, I wish. Baby, it's right here. Come and get it, like, and get it while it's hot, because it may not always be there, Any number of things could happen. And that goes the same way for other queer ventures. I know a number of different guys who have gotten up and tried to make, Tim, we've talked about this, a couple of different gainer platforms, a couple of different websites, different guys trying to make new bear clothing. Shit closes after a year because people aren't buying the products, and people will turn around, they'll go every time, oh, well, it's too expensive. It's way more expensive than retail. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. This is a faggot in his sewing room, stitching some shit together. They're not a multi-conglomerate fucking obliging children in China and India to put your shit together. Fun fucking fact. It costs that much because it takes me fucking hours, or whatever that TikTok song is. Like, just shut up and take my money. Basically, like, shut up and pay, bitch. Just do it. Do it now.
I had a business partner for Fat Marker Clothing that ended up closing their shop earlier this year. They had such great stuff and great company, great products. I bought some of their stuff, and Julius is such a nice guy, and they basically had to close their shop just for that reason. Like, people just were not spending money, and I understand a lot of people lost their jobs and income sources during the pandemic, but it is so important to support small business, because people are out there hustling and trying to do right by the community, trying to make a living, trying to make the world a better place. And I got a little bit heated because people will be so quick to share what I call the Instagram bodies. Oh, this guy's hot, let me share this. But why don't you support the great businesses that are out there? Like, I think Mr. Pup, MTL, and Alphabet SoCal Mafia. There's a lot of LGBTQ plus small businesses out there who could certainly use the support. And support can be in a variety of things. You don't necessarily have to buy their products. While that's nice, I would love for the guide to fly off the shelves, but just share the posts. Share, take a picture with you wearing a product or holding a guide, and share it out and say, hey, I got this. I'm supporting a small business. I've made the point to make sure, as much as I can, to try to use fonts in the book that were designed by Black type designers. The guide is printed in the USA. I'm a person of color and an LGBTQ owned business. You're supporting multiple levels of a small business that is important to keep in the back of your mind.
100%. All of this is so important, and I understand we've hit our hour mark here, but I just want to ask, as well, is there an aspect of what you do that we haven't touched on yet that you want to take this moment to bring to the podcast and share with the listeners?
Yeah, a few things. So, despite all of this conversation, and whether people follow the guide or not, what I want people to get out of this project and even this conversation is that you're not alone. There are others out there who are like you, who are into the similar things that you're into, and your people are out there. Social media is just a facade. You don't have to believe everything that you see. And there's a whole community out there that's willing to accept you with open arms. And the guide is one of those entities that's willing to do that. Labels don't have to be a bad thing. You can be one label, you can be multiple. You can be a gainer pig if you want. You can be a gainer bear if you want. You can be a daddy gainer. Like there are things that you can hang on to really solidify your identity. And just to reinforce that there's no right way to be queer, gay, bisexual, trans, and there's no right way to be a gainer either, or wrong way.
All of that.
All the things.
All the things. And all the things can be found in the Gay Body Guide. So, I mean, listen, before we wrap things up here, is there anything else that you want to bring today before we move on to closing?
I would just say, hey, look, gainers are some of the nicest people that I've interacted with. So come follow me. Find me on the X of it all, the Instagram of it all. I'm on Facebook. I'm even on Grommr as well. You can send me a message. If you get the guide, tell me what you think. Tell me what I need to change. Like, this is an evolving thing that is bigger than me. So let's bring our community together and let's just find ways to establish ways of self-acceptance and accepting others, not just ourselves, but accepting others.
I love all of that. This has been
Preach.
well, I mean, but seriously, this is exactly why we wanted to have you on, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is so specific to the gaining and fetus experience. And in a sense, this is the encyclopedia of it all, you know, where we are going episode by episode talking about every last little thing and really just pulling it all apart to know what it's all about. But what you're doing is so important as well, because even if it's a snapshot for us, it's an opportunity to learn about others and for other people to learn about us. So what we're doing is not only important, it's crucial, it's necessary, and I can't say thank you enough, because it's a phenomenal piece of work. And now's the time to talk a little shop. So listen, where can people find the Gay Body Guide online?
Best place to start is to go to thegaybodyguide.com. So there are multiple ways that you can order the book. You can learn a little bit more about me. I have some blogs up. I have some social media content like story templates that cover the gamut. You can follow me at The Gay Body Guide on Twitter/X, Grommr, Instagram, Facebook. I don't think I'm anywhere else, but you can also find the book on Amazon. Amazon's search engine is a little bit weird, so it's best to go to the website and then from there go to Amazon. And if you own a shop or you want to buy the guide in bulk, there is a place to do that as well, or you can reach out to me. You can send me an email, thegaybodyguide@gmail.com. If you look relatively easy enough, you will find me. And I respond to all messages.
I love that. And just as an aside, is there anywhere that you would like people to find you personally online if people want to chat?
Negatory, because I don't need people sliding up in my DMs.
Fair dues. Well, listen, that's it for another phenomenal week here on Thicc Radio. Please like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at thiccymouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can also write to us at thethicradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stan and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by BlueSky.